my mission to help you save time and money with your restaurant project. Today is story time, and it's not a fairy tale, y'all. More of a cautionary tale about the way things used to be, and this is going to be the story of two of my mentors to whom I was very close who died young. My name is Brandon Sharp. As an executive chef, I was a 7-time Michelin star recipient, and now as a chef owner and entrepreneur, I have 3 restaurants here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I'm sitting in the private dining room here at Bluebird, which is our French bistro. All right. But in my dreams, I slew the dragon. Colin Hay. I understand the allure of the culinary version of the rock and roll lifestyle. Work hard, play hard, live fast, die young. Yeah. I've gone a ways down that road before, but even Marco Pierre White is still alive and trending on YouTube. So everyone just relax. Lest we reflect too fondly on the bad old days of drinking behind the line, getting high in the walk-in, and snorting coke in bathroom stalls, here are the stories of 2 of my mentors who died young. I just looked up their obituaries to make sure that I had the dates of their deaths correct. I can't quite believe how long they've been gone already. Seeing the pictures of them in their prime has me clenching my jaw and blinking back tears. They weren't angels or heroes or famous, but when they were alive, they were ravenously alive. And yet they seemed to take Charles Bukowski's advice, which is find what you love and do it till it kills you. Find what you love and do it till it kills you. They seem to take that as a personal challenge. So this is Kendrick Anderson's story. I can't even remember how I got from Chapel Hill to Nantucket Island in late May after graduation in the summer of 1997. I think my friend Brian Freeberger, he and I had spent a summer on Nantucket together previously, working in restaurants up there. He probably drove me up I-95, probably spent a few days at the beach while I looked for work and then took off. So it was, and still probably is, very difficult to book automobile passage on the old steamship ferry. And if you're just a working grunt like I was, you can get where you need to go on that little island just by walking or biking. So I worked through that summer and all the way through the fall and Thanksgiving until early December for Chef Rick Anderson at the Quaker House. It's an old inn with a few rooms upstairs and a restaurant downstairs. Rick and his wife Stephanie were the new owners. Stephanie came from a well-off local family whose generational wealth, like many maritime others on Nantucket, was of Portuguese descent. Rick's buddy, Chef Jimmy Boyle, aka Jimmy Butter, flew out from the Raintree, I think it was in the San Juan Islands in the Pacific Northwest, to help us open. The work was challenging, the days were long, it was stressful. I mean, it was a freaking restaurant opening, right? And other than the 3 of us, there was a Danish exchange student, so on Nantucket back then, at least during the summers, tons of Jamaicans, tons of Danes, tons of Irish coming over to work for the summer. So we had a Danish student who helped us with breakfast, and we had a pastry cook, and she came and prepped desserts in the morning. And I think she worked at another restaurant as well, and she covered my day off on garde manger. So we had this little galley kitchen. It was tiny. It was only big enough for one person behind the hotline at each meal. And so the galley kitchen was tiny. It was only big enough for one person behind the hotline at each meal. I think it had 4 burners, a griddle, and then a broiler underneath the griddle, which was a pretty cool setup. And my garde manger station was just a hollowed out space under the stairwell. And all it had was a single door reach-in and a little shelf up above for plates. The food wasn't remarkable. All the entrees were served with whipped potatoes and same sauteed vegetables, but it was scratch cooking with fresh local ingredients. Rick and Jemmy had become best friends at NECI, which is the acronym for New England Culinary Institute, and they knew the right way to do things, even if they often veered off course a little bit. I remember Jimmy telling me one time, I can't remember if it was hot oil into a plastic thing or if he was cooling down a creme anglaise without ice, but I remember him telling me, I don't ever want to see you do what I'm about to do. And how's that for leading by example? So I roomed with a friend of Rick's, a local guy, local drunk and knucklehead named Tommy. Tommy's mother had a big house on the edge of town, And she lived downstairs, and I mean, it was a creepy old house. She lived downstairs, and I rented a room upstairs. And there was a mirror when I would come in at night. Anytime I would come in, she had a mirror in the hallway so that she could see the front door from her rocking chair in the living room. And so no matter what time when I came home, she was in that chair, just her blank reflection staring at me. Real quick, again, the mission of the Restaurant Incubator is to help you save time and money with your restaurant project. If you need a little help getting your project off the ground, if you want some admin help, if you want to see sample budget template, business plan, critical path, pre-opening budget, 5-year pro forma, click the link in the show notes to the Restaurant Launchpad. All the business tools you need are right there. So Rick and Jimmy's diet seemed to consist mostly of Stoli and Marlboro Reds. And then now and then it seemed like they would have a tray of tacos from the taco shack down the block by the steamship wharf. And then after the first 2 weeks of business at the Quaker House, Jimmy had to go back to his own restaurant. So Rick he got a little wobbly then. Rick would come downstairs in the mornings a lot of times to the basement prep kitchen with a cocktail shaker with a shaken and strained cranberry and vodka in there to start the day. And he kept his nitrous chargers up on top of a ceiling tile that hung down in the dry storage room. And, you know, after work each night, shift drinks were usually like a pint container of Beam and Coke. So after working there, I moved back to the mainland that December, and I had a couple of detours before I went to the CIA at Hyde Park in March of '98. So keeping in touch back then meant phone calls or letters, neither which Rick was very good at, or secondhand sources. And I heard some truly awful stories about things Rick and Tommy had gotten into, stories whose truth I've never tried to ascertain. And I hope they're pure fabrications, let's put it that way. Many years later, Rick and I lost touch. Many years later, when Elizabeth and I lived on Park Street in St. Helena, California, Rick called me out of the blue, nearly like 10 years, 4 time zones, and several phone numbers and addresses later. I don't know how, maybe he tracked me down through my hotel job, but he was living and working in Mendocino, which is a remote, chilly coastal town, beautiful little place perched on these bluffs above the Pacific, pretty far up the PCH and Pacific Coast Highway in Northern California. I couldn't make out very well what he was saying. He sounded pretty heavily sedated, but eventually I gathered that he was in a great deal of pain. It sounded like it was from his hip, but likely more widespread, and he was unable to get to the market downstairs for groceries. Would I please call the market and order and pay for a list of groceries that he needed? The people who ran the market knew Rick, and they would bring everything upstairs to him. He sounded terrible. Weeks later, months, it's been so long I can't recall, he came to visit Elizabeth and me to have dinner and stay the night over in Napa, so it's probably 2.5 hours away from Mendocino. Our older boy was still really little then, and I don't think the younger one was even born yet. I was apprehensive. You know, I thought Rick would screech into our quiet little neighborhood of there's just like old folks and little old ranch homes there, like, you know, blaring music, blaring Boston or something out of his speakers and smoking a cigarette or who knows what as he walked up our driveway. But he surprised me. He was calm, he was polite, and he knew he didn't come from a rich family, but you know, he knew gentility. He knew how to have good manners. He wasn't but that visit, yeah, he was calm. He was polite. His green eyes were alight and alert rather than bloodshot. And his freckled face was handsome, like I remembered it, you know, rather than puffy. So I don't recall the details of that visit. I just remember my own relief and my own calm. I cooked dinner for us, and I watched him sit on our couch and look out the front window as he was just, you know, playing quietly with our son. And his own college-age son, Malcolm, had made his way to the West Coast. And whether that was to work on a ship or study, I've forgotten. That was the last time I saw Rick. He died on July 18th, 2016, at the age of 50. Chef Terrell Brunet. Y'all scared? The CIA chef instructor for our Skills 1 class, our first real class in a real kitchen after 6 weeks of classroom work, strode up to us, chest out, as my fellow students and I waited outside the classroom door. The name tag on his immaculate chef's jacket read T. Brunet. You should be. Chef Brunet had us on the run. So at the CIA, your skills chef has an outsized influence on your entire education. because most instructors have you for either one 7-day or one 14-day block. Whoever teaches you skills, because they teach you both skills 1 and skills 2, is your lord and master for 2 14-day blocks. Slicing, searing, braising, all the basic techniques, and, more than a few broken hollandaises and bernaises. And so this was shortly after I left the Quaker House. And so the experience that I gained with Rick at the Quaker House really put me out in front of my classmates when it came to kitchen knowledge and kitchen acumen. And so I was able to ask Chef Brunet more interesting questions and dive a little deeper, past the course material than most of the others. And so I soon started working as an assistant with him for the adult education classes that he taught on Saturdays. The theme of the course he taught was Creole cuisine, which he had absorbed by birthright in his hometown of Mandeville, Louisiana, which is on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, opposite New Orleans. And BYOB, day drinking, was definitely encouraged for the students in that class. So there's a 16-week section in the middle of the CIA curriculum called the externship. Okay, and this entails going to work under the auspices of the CIA, but at a restaurant approved by the school for some real-world experience. And so I had all sorts of trouble deciding on and finding on a restaurant, and finally to the point where it was too late, where all really like the good slots, especially the good ones in New York and Boston and close places, had been taken. But Chef Brunet's friend, David Honeysett, he had just started a job as executive sous chef at a brand new restaurant in Chelsea in New York City, kind of right off Union Square, called The Tonic. And the executive chef there was Chris Gesualdi. And y'all have heard me talk about Chef Gesualdi before, but he had worked for Thomas Keller as sous chef at Raquel. And he had also earned three stars of his own from Ruth Reichel from the New York Times when Chris was the chef at Montrachet. So the problem, though, was there was a great opportunity for me to get in on the ground floor of a place with a great chef, great legacy, huge expectations. But the problem was that the Tonic wasn't on the approved list, and a restaurant technically had to be open for a year to even be considered to be approved by the CIA as an externship site. So I wrote letters to Tim Ryan. He was the VP of the CIA, beseeching his help with approval. I don't know what other strings were pulled, but permission was granted. I found out that I was able to go, and off I went. So, and you can read more about my experiences at the Tonic in a Substack article called "Finding Meaning in a Meaningless Task." It's all about scrubbing the freezer floor. So Chef Brunet led me to Chef Honeysett, therefore to Chef Gesualdi, and to Chef Thomas Keller, and so therefore to my first job out of the CIA at the French Laundry. And so at graduation, I clearly remember Chef Brunet telling my parents how proud he was of me. And he tendered compliments in such tiny and infrequent doses that his praise meant a great deal. We kept in touch on and off while I worked at the French Laundry. And when I left that restaurant after 2 years, I headed down to this terrible backwater of a town in northwest Louisiana just to work for Chef Brunet again. So he had left the CIA and he had moved back closer to home. So gone was the green and gold collared pressed white chef jacket. Gone was the tall white toque, but also gone was the clean shave and the brown curls. And so in their place was Chef Brunet with a shaved head, gray and goatee, big silver hoop earrings, and a denim chef jacket. I literally didn't recognize him the first time I saw him again in that kitchen. Jefferson, Louisiana was a long, long way from both the CIA and from the French Laundry. Let's just say things didn't work out for any of us at the restaurant in Jefferson, Louisiana. That crew, we were all former students of Brunet's. We went our separate ways. I ended up staying at Brunet's brother's house in Mandeville for a little while. Brunet and we had some wild nights at Ruby's Roadhouse on the North Shore, but it wasn't at all clear to me or to him where he was headed next. So I'd landed a job with John Besh down at Restaurant August. And then I secured an apartment up near Audubon Park. And a few weeks later, I'd had a falling out with Brunet over a misunderstanding about a rent payment. And Elizabeth moved out to go to grad school at Tulane. And so then after I had moved from Mandeville down to New Orleans, now and then Elizabeth and I would drive up across the causeway to see him from time to time. We'd go to Brunet's mom's house for crab cakes or go to his stepdad's boat for vodka martinis, but we soon lost touch. So then One gray San Francisco day, 2 days later, I still can't believe this happened. I pulled up to a 4-way stop sign, like Filbert, Larkin, Polk, Union. We lived on that side of Russian Hill near Polk Gulch. I pulled up to a 4-way stop sign near our Russian Hill apartment. I'm in my Tacoma pickup. And then in a yellow sports car opposite me, turning right, was Brunet. Like all of a sudden, and we literally just like goggle-eyed at each other, drove opposite ways around the block, double parked on Union Street, and got out and just hugged like right there on the sidewalk. It was, what are the chances? I didn't have his contact info, and I don't believe that he knew that I moved to San Francisco or I knew that he had. And so after Katrina hit New Orleans, he had looked up an old friend in San Francisco, and he was working at a place called the Elite Cafe. And I'd run into him while he was out apartment hunting. So we kept in touch throughout the years after that. He'd come up to, after I moved from San Francisco to Napa Valley, he'd come up to Napa Valley for lunch now and then. And like proud Papa, Chef Brunet had returned. He loved saying that one of his best students had gone on to earn a Michelin star. He'd married a kind, lovely, much younger woman named Neely. And they moved to West County, which is what the locals call Sonoma County, west of Highway 101, out in the sticks. So we drove to see them for an outdoor gumbo party one summer afternoon. And we dealt with the minor chaos that just always seemed to surround Brunet. Stray dogs, drunk neighbors who were party guests, unruly teenage son. But the chicken and sausage gumbo was off the chain. It was as good as ever. So when Chef Terrell Brunet died on March 5th, 2021, at the age of 58, I wasn't able to go out to Oakland for the funeral. I wrote letters of condolence to his son, Trey, and to his mom, Dottie. Neely was kind enough to send me his favorite knife, which is a 12-inch Henkel's Pro. I still use it. I used it last night to get the top of a jar of Talenti gelato was stuck, and I was whacking at it with the heel of that knife to get it off. It's one of the only knife tricks I know. So I use that almost daily in my kitchen at home, and it's in rotation with a Mac Pro that I got at the French Laundry, because when we worked at the French Laundry back then, Thomas had a deal with Mac knives. You could get Mac knives for 50% off. And then also with a Wusthof, a high-profile Wusthof that Elizabeth got in her knife kit because she attended Cordon Bleu in San Francisco years ago. So anyway, that knife from Neely and from Chef Brunet arrived razor sharp, and I try to keep it that way. And what better gift to be handed down from one chef to another. It makes me sad to tell you all this, but most of my memories of these men, the overpowering balance of them, in fact, are happy, fun, wistful, poignant, hilarious, and powerful, and still very, very vibrant. I can see Rick, red-faced, he was a big guy, growling, grunting, red-faced, and he's wrestling a chain net full of scallops into the back of this little boat it was so cold. November morning when he woke me up early to go scalloping on Nantucket Bay one time, and the freaking donkey motor broke. So we had to hand haul the scallops into the boat. And then there's Brunet taking me into, a bar on St. Charles Avenue in the early. So I know y'all think, if you haven't been there, Mardi Gras is one day, but Mardi Gras is actually 10 days. And the real fun parades before the crowds come are on the weekdays earlier, the week before. So like the Thursday before. So, and I can remember him taking me into a bar on St. Charles Street up, way uptown, closer to the park where the floats line up before the parade. And he takes me into a bar at 10 in the morning and orders a Cosmopolitan. And I just remember him saying, "What the hell do you mean you've never heard of Jerry Jeff Walker?" So I'm well aware that I'm the same age now as Rick was when he died. Still a bit younger than Brunet, for sure. But to all of you chefs and cooks out there, and you bartenders, servers, managers too, yes, this industry is hard and this industry is fun. A lot of times, for a lot of people, it's too fun and it's too hard. You're probably not a rock star. You're definitely not Keith Richards. So, take from these true stories of mine what you will. Is it really better to burn out than to fade away? If you got anything at all out of today's podcast, please take a second now, hit that drop down on Apple, on Spotify, give us 5 stars. You'd be surprised how much your rating gives us the juice, on these platforms to for them to promote us and for them to reach the people like you who need to hear from the show and need help saving money and time opening their own restaurant. So stay safe out there, y'all. Stay humble, stay hungry.